What's more Scottish than Donald Trump? Haggis and Donald Trump. The mind boggles. Now, Katie Halper is a writer. She's the host of the Katie Halper Show and co-host of Useful Idiots, which must be a cracking show because there's so much material to work with. But something happened to her on the way to the studio. Let's find out. Katie Halper, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. Wonderful to see you again.
Thanks so much for having me.
The accident that befell you, the act of censorship that brought one of your streams of knowledge and wisdom to an end was what exactly?
So I have been a guest on the show Rising, which is on the Hill. I've been a weekly guest. I would come on every week for about 3 years. Then they also had me do some guest hosting, so doing actual hosting for the show. I'd done that 4 times. I was supposed to do it 3 more times. It was maybe going to become more regular. I also had pitched them a pilot, which was an all women's panel show, kind of like The View, but an all leftist version. We'd shot a pilot for that, and we'd released 1 clip, and that did really well. And while I was hosting for them, hosts get to do something called radars. They're basically straight to camera monologues. And I decided that I want to do one about the controversy, which should not have been controversial, but the controversy that followed Rashida Tlaib's claim that that progressives are realizing more and more that you can't be progressive and support Israel's apartheid government. And of course, the claim that Israel's government is an apartheid government. She had said that, she was attacked, so I decided to both defend her and also make the case that Israel is indeed an apartheid government. And I made the case by citing the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, several Palestinian human rights organizations, the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem, South African leaders, including Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, and ironically enough, several Israeli politicians and officials, including Israeli prime ministers, all of whom, the ones I cited, all of them warned that apartheid was either happening now or would happen shortly. So I did that, and then they refused to run that monologue. And then when I pushed back and asked if they could let me at least talk about it as a guest, if not running my monologue, that's when I was told that my services were no longer needed. So my appearing, something that had happened over the course of 3 years regularly, that relationship was severed. And I was told basically to submit any and all unpaid invoices, and I was told best of luck.
Of course, the fools on the Hill had never heard of the Streisand effect. And of course, you have now been lifted by the Streisand effect. The book they banned always goes to the top of the bestseller list. What was the reaction amongst the public to this extraordinary, brute act of censorship?
So the great news was that despite the fact that I was censored by the Hill, I definitely wanted to get the message out there, and I had written the script. So what I did was I reached out to the great people at Breakthrough News, who are actually an independent media organization who don't engage in censorship and don't censor their hosts. So I collaborated with them, and we made the video that I had written the script for, which I had actually recorded it on the Hill. It's not that they didn't record it. They just recorded it and refused to release it. So I made that, and you can find that video both on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's youtube.com/The Katie Halper Show, or on Breakthrough News's YouTube channel. And the response that I've gotten has been overwhelmingly positive. A lot of support. My Patreon has gone up, which is nice, which is patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. I'm just going to shamelessly plug that. But it's true. People have really, a lot of people have reached out.
Now you're no longer being paid by the Hill.
Right, yes. So, and I wrote an op-ed about it for the Daily Beast because I wanted to make sure it was in a kind of mainstream corporate publication. I didn't think it would reach the Hill in the same way if I did it somewhere kind of more leftist or more independent. So I decided to do it at the Daily Beast. It's been covered by the Sheer Post, Mondo Weiss, Palestine Legal, the Worldwide Socialist Web, I'm sure I'm forgetting some places now. Oh, Juan Cole. Um, and yeah, a lot of people. Roger Waters saluted me, and Rashida Tlaib. Rashida Tlaib tweeted about it. Roger Waters mentioned it on the Joe Rogan show. So, and of course, I mean, this is what happened to me pales in comparison to what happens to Palestinian journalists. And of course, as we all know, Palestinian journalists risk their not just their livelihoods but their lives. And of course, Shireen Abu Akleh is just one of the several examples of that. So I want to, of course, make sure to elevate those stories. And also want to shout out Adala, the really good legal and human rights organization whose work was really helpful for the monologue that I wrote, and also Electronic Intifada, who do great work, and also whose work I looked to when I was writing that monologue.
Now, I presume you were attacked as being anti-Semitic.
Well,
but you
either
are Jewish.
Right.
This is no. Go
yeah,
on.
I am. So I like to correct people and say you're lobbing the wrong smear. I prefer self-loathing Jew. Thank you. They're erasing me when they call me an anti-Semite. Of course, I kid somewhat because the people who call you anti-Semitic or self-loathing Jew, their thesis is that I've internalized anti-Semitism. And of course, what I say to that is the irony is that the anti-Semitic trope is that all Jews are a monolith who have the same opinion on Israel. That's the anti-Semitic trope. That's the stereotype. Being Jewish does not mean you have a certain political ideology. It does not mean you unquestioningly and blindly support the government of Israel. In fact, there's been a long, rich history of anti-Zionist Jewish scholarship and activism. And so what places like AIPAC and the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, and AIPAC like to do is pretend that any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, and they do that so that they can stifle or delegitimize the very legitimate and valid criticism of Israel. So since they know they can't really push back on the arguments, they can't push back on the facts on the ground, such as the fact that Israel is an apartheid government, they can't do that. So what they do is they try to shoot the messenger so that they can try to taint the message. And again, the irony is that there is real anti-Semitism in the world when places like the ADL and AIPAC weaponize anti-Semitism to stifle critique of Israel. They are trivializing anti-Semitism.
Yes, and I was going to make the point that here I don't know if you saw the Al Jazeera expose of the labor files, which all these wonderful, slightly elderly now, Jewish women fighters that featured in that program, who have been fighting anti-Semitism and racism and for justice for Palestine for all of their adult lives.
Right.
All of them have now been kicked out of the Labour Party. Keir Starmer, in the name of rooting out anti-Semitism, has expelled more Jews from the Labour Party than anyone would ever have dreamt of in the entire history of the Labour movement.
It's really disgusting. It is a ironically disgusting thing to do, especially, targeting Jews is kind of an ironic thing to do when you're claiming to stamp out anti-Semitism. But again, it just shows you how cynical these people are, people who weaponize anti-Semitism and just try to use it for political ends. And I would also say that something is that's important to look at is, because AIPAC and ADL do not represent most Jews. And for a lot of Jews, it's actually their Jewish values. I mean, this is a whole other discussion we could get into, but there's even something called Tikkun Olam, which is Hebrew for repair the world. And that is a social justice idea that motivates some Jews. And that's something that makes some Jews actually speak out against what Israel's doing and say, not in our name, not in my name. And of course, the atrocious, horrific tragedy, abomination that is the Holocaust is something that for many Jews, progressive Jews, that's something that it's because of things like that we don't want to stand in solidarity with what Israel's doing, because the way that you respond to the Holocaust should not be through ethnic cleansing and apartheid state.
Well, a late and great friend of mine, the Right Honourable Sir Gerald Kaufman, whose grandmother was murdered in the Holocaust, said my grandmother wasn't murdered in her bed in Eastern Europe to provide cover for Israeli terror forces.
Right.
Murdering other people's grandmothers in their beds in the occupied Palestinian lands. It was one of the most electric parliamentary moments. Look it up.
Wow.
But Katie, here's the other irony. The theme tonight on the show is world turned upside down, and one of the extents to which the world is turned upside down is that it is people who identify themselves as being left, liberal, progressive, who are hottest on censorship in this strange year of 2022. We've got the grotesque spectacle of people on the right championing free speech and people on the left seeking to cancel people like you and me. How does that make you feel?
Yeah, that's pretty disturbing to see. And of course, it's not all leftists, but there are some people who identify as left and actually try to get people like you and me kind of canceled as members of the left. I would just say that anyone on the left who supports censorship is either being short-sighted or disingenuous, because the people who suffer most from censorship are the people on the left. And of course, this is a great example of, people who are really canceled and censored are people who probably one of the most censored groups of people are people who criticize Israel and defend Palestine. And if you're a Palestinian, forget about it. So anyone who cares about, allegedly cares about the most marginalized people in the world and elevating those voices should know that censorship is not going to get them anywhere.
Katie, I wish you all the best. I know that this big audience tonight will be saying the same thing. I hope we see you again before too long, and the best of luck with the work that you've still managed to hold on to. I hope the Streisand effect sweeps you to ever greater audiences. Thank you for again joining us.